right, John, thank you for joining me today on the Confos podcast. And we met when you told your stories in the NZ a
Yes,
year or so ago, I think in November 2022.
correct.
And you mentioned about many things, but one thing that I remember was about pretty much the change of belief, I guess, or philosophy, or change of perspective when you realize that your grandkids, that were then cute um, boys, are now gonna be adult um, African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Six of them. Your grandkids were adopted, like seven of them, and six
Mm-hmm.
of them were African American.
Mm-hmm.
And then you started to get worried. And I think you mentioned also in your story about the Michael Brown,
Yes,
right, in 2014. And then
right.
and then you connected this two into together. And you know, and and I could relate to that um, because the family and friends that I started having in Pittsburgh, and yeah, my wife mentioned that too. Like, oh, look at these kids, our kids' friends, like they were all cute
Mm-hmm.
now. So I was wondering, like, at one point, the a lot of people, or the community would view them as dangerous, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you have any thoughts on that? But can you follow up on that?
Yeah, I think that for me, with the adoption of black children by my daughters, so my grandchildren, um, exposed me up close and personal to people from another race. Up until that time, most of my life had been, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in a suburb, a white only suburb. My father was a fireman. My mom was a stay at home mom. Um, all the friends, all the neighbors, the church we went to was all predominantly white folks. So the only exposure or understanding I had of black people or people of other races is what you saw on the news or what you heard hearsay, but without any direct exposure to them. And I always had considered myself open and non-prejudicial, but when the the Michael Brown incident happened, and I had just newly retired, and that was also just a few years after my uh, daughter started adopting my grandchildren, who were black at that time, little boys. Um, and yeah, two things started to really gnaw at me. One was a realization of these cute little black boys were going to be black teenagers,
Hmm.
and how they were depicted in the news, and it was troubling to me. Um, I think the other aspect was just the fact that some of my long held perceptions about race and equality um, weren't uh, wasn't feeling good as I was starting to look at things, and so it compelled me to start listening to different media outlets and start doing some reading. And the advantage of being retired, I had time on my hands, and I like to read. And rather in the past, most of my reading would be, if it wasn't for work, it was enjoyable reading, novels, crime, mysteries, that type of thing. now I started reading about history,
Mm.
and I was confronted with a lot of things that I either was never taught or overlooked or didn't absorb. And the general attitude I think I had was that people's troubles were a result of bad choices. And if they would just make better choices, they would have a better life. And as I started to realize that so many systems and so many laws and so much of our history has been skewed against various groups of people in our country, the whole fairness issue and justice issue started to raise its head.
Right.
And
I think it's also part of the, I must say, the education system, not necessarily school, but also as parents, right? When we teach our kids, it's easy when we can use standards, right? But it's hard when the standard is not one, when we have to take, like you mentioned, that not everybody starts with the same zero,
right.
Some people are negative, some people are positive, some people are way positive, some people are way negative. But when you're teaching people, it's hard when everybody is starts differently. So you have to assume, okay, you're 5 years old. This is what you need to know, and this is, I assume, where you start, right? And then this is when you're 10 years old, 12 years old, right? So the realization, I think, only happens when you really think about it, when you're an adult, or when you're hopefully teenager, but probably when you're an adult, you need to think about, oh yeah, people are different. And people start differently. People learn differently. And sometimes, not just learn, sometimes people perceive things differently.
Yes.
And that makes it challenging, right? And I can say that that's the challenge for society, right? And right now, that's why we have a lot of this, I must say, like confusion, right? All this disinformation, misinformation. Sometimes I think that, okay, is it, okay, some things are really purposefully misled, but some things that are, people just have different perception.
Yes.
People just like have a different meaning of, for example, safe. Safe for me may not be safe for you, may not be safe for him, may not be safe for her, right? And that's why when we say, okay, this people, this group of demographic are different from us, they are dangerous, right? That unless you, I guess you can put yourself in their shoes, it's hard to change,
Right.
So so when you have that change in your mindset or in your perception, how did your, then probably your friends and family take it?
Many of them not well, to be honest. And it was funny, Will, the more I started reading and getting exposed to things, the more energized I became and agitated and angry, to be quite honest. Why wasn't I taught this? Wait, this is only half the story. Why is the history so skewed? All of these things. And as I would share what I'm learning with friends and family members, I found them to be very defensive and in some cases outright hostile, that I was judging them. And as I look back, there are probably ways I could have said it differently or better. And I would have maybe chosen a different line of questioning and not try and put them on the spot. So I take some ownership of that I was angry. I didn't handle things well. But I think the thing that I have found the most frustrating with not all, but many friends and family that are well entrenched in maybe a more conservative viewpoint of the world is what I would call just a lack of curiosity. And, when I would ask a question like, okay, in rough numbers, if the Black population in the United States is 13%, but they represent 40% of the prison population, what does that say to you? Do you believe that the Black community is more prone to crime, or is there something else going on? Does that say something about our criminal justice system? Does it say something about, our courts or our laws or how we police? And they would just shut down. I'm not talking about it, is what I would get a lot of times. And that just was really, frustrating. Or if someone would make a blanket statement that the immigrants are taking all of our jobs, and Americans, we need to protect our own jobs because the immigrants are taking our jobs. Well, I had recently been doing a lot of reading about immigration, and that's categorically not true. And when I would challenge that, I'm learning to do better at challenge. Instead of coming at them, I would say something. Well, that the jobs that immigrants take are not displacing jobs from American workers, and I will cite a statistic or something like that, and then they'll just shut down. They don't want to discuss it any further. And so that's, I find, really frustrating because, I didn't really come to my newfound understanding until I was 60 years old. And so it took me that long to do that. So I want to give people the benefit of the doubt of
How nice of you.
of trying to, if you're not exposed to it, had I not, I have to ask myself, Will, had I not had Black grandchildren, would I have started the journey to understand more and try and educate myself more about this?
Yes.
And so if I have family and friends that have not had a life event that caused them to look at that, I'm trying to be a bit more hospitable and understanding that, okay, but confronted with some of this stuff, isn't there a curiosity to understand it better rather than just make blanket statements?
Yeah.
That's what I struggle with.
Yeah. I think, my guess is that, by nature, we would like, or our preference is to pick the ones that's easy, right? And we don't want to think hard.
Right.
We just want to think something that's easy. So when we are faced about difficult task, that people just like, that's too hard. I'm just gonna do this, right? I think it shows, not just on the personal level, but in organization, say government even, right? We say the city of Pittsburgh, we have a lot of problems, right? But and people mention it, but they only mention it sporadically, right? They don't really do what probably people in corporate does it, right? When we have a problem, we try to break it apart into little pieces, right? And then we assign, someone to do this, someone do this, someone do that. This department does this, the other department does that, right? Not here. And then you go back to the individual level when you mention about that, so why is the people incarcerated people do not correspond to the population's percentage, and people do not have that, capacity, or probably it's not, They don't want to see. Okay, let's break it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they're in jail. Why are they in jail? What caused it? What are the sequence of events that lead it to them? And let's go back. So that's just the events. Let's go from the personal itself. What kind of challenges that this person has faced in the past, and let's break it down, right?
Right.
Probably childhood trauma. Probably there's a certain events that it just happened in the past 24 hours that made him do or her do this particular things, right? But people say, oh, when you do that analysis for one person, it will take me a day.
Yes.
Right? And that's just analysis, and there's we have not even talked about action items,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's like too much. You're just gonna say, I don't know. I mean, you're making my life difficult.
Right.
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 I'm just gonna say, hey, okay, all right, whatever.
No, I agree, and I think that most of these issues that we've touched on, there's a lot of complexity to them. And they're intertwined with other things, and so it takes some real evaluation. And unfortunately, there are many of us that I call it bumper sticker philosophy, a one sentence statement. Things like the Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it. Well,
Don't you know the Bible is thick? It's not that one-liner.
Yeah, I know. and it is full of cultural implications and languages and translation, and there's so much context that it's
right.
There's a level of complication there, and that is what I find the most frustrating is with dear family and friends that that won't engage in that, and so my wife and I have had to make the decision that the relationship with family members or with dear friends is worth more than our disagreements. And so we have chosen to stay off hot subjects. So
that's why you said you only talk about news, weather, and sports.
News, weather, and sports, yes. And we can talk about our traveling, and we can talk about our grandchildren and all of that kind of thing. But what is challenging about that is that the reason they are very, very close friends or they're very close family is that one time we used to share a lot more with them. We could share our feelings. We could share our hopes. Our aspirations, our fears, our anxieties. And now we have to be very careful that we don't touch on certain subjects.
Landmines.
Yes, landmines. And so we're very, very have to be very careful.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know what started. I still remember the news article. I don't know how many years ago that things that you don't talk during Thanksgiving dinner.
Yes.
I don't know whether was it when Obama got elected or Trump was elected. Things like that. That like okay, these are the no-nos, right?
Yes.
And it's like, I mean, that's sad. I mean, people should be able to agree to disagree. But I think even that term, I rarely hear it anymore.
Right.
Agree to disagree. People is like, either I win or you get lost, right?
Right. And one of the things I found, especially talking about the racial issue with some of our family members, was that when I would be critical of, let's say, the redlining or the double standards in education, or bring up some of the things in policing and all of that, what I found was from my perspective, I was talking about some policy issues or some history or some practices that were going on, and the recipient, my dear friend or my family member, took that I was being critical of them. And they said, "You're calling me a racist." I'm not calling you a racist. I am calling out that there are some racist policies. There's racism embedded into our history that I believe we need to address. But they took that as I was attacking them personally. So that is something I've worked at when I try and have those conversations, as few and far between as they are, to make it clear. I'm not pointing this out, but there are certain things that I think we can't ignore.
Right.
So
right.
that poses a conundrum.
And I'm when talking about family members, but then the grandkids of yours, have they ever met the family members that disagree with your viewpoints and your African American grandkids? Have they met? Have they interacted?
Oh, yes.
And how did you see them? Are they,
I would have to say genuinely, Will, they are supportive and loving to my grandchildren. And this is the thing. This is the thing that I have learned is on a personal level, they're very open, loving, and accepting. But when it comes to voting for a candidate that would support better education in the schools, or taking down some of the laws that create these enclaves of communities, or better support for mothers in poverty that are trying to raise children and all that, they absolutely vote very conservatively, and the government shouldn't be involved with that. There's a kind of a dichotomy. Personally, I will treat them well. If there is someone in front of me that's needs help, I will help them. But don't ask me to support the government to do that. That's not what the government. I hear that a lot. That's not the government's role. That's a personal thing. Which, if you peel back the onion, my opinion, that is a shallow argument, because you personally are voting for candidates or policies that keep some of our most unfortunate or impoverished people in poverty. So anyway, it's
right. So it reminds me of research that I read many years ago. If I'm not mistaken, it was done by Pew Research, that that conviction that government should take care of people who are unfortunate are the view of the Democrats, right? But with that view, with that belief that they do not donate as much as the people on the right side, on the conservative side. On the conservative side, like you said, they believe that it should be a personal level. It should not be government's job.
Right.
And as a result, they donate more to their church. They donate more to other, charitable foundations. And I find that really interesting. Both of them actually share the same belief that there are people out there who needs help.
Right.
But then they disagree on who needs to help them, right? Does it have to come out of your pocketbook directly, or does it have to go through the government? Do they actually believe the government to take care of it? So there's an opportunity there. It's like, if you, like you said, when they are faced with the problem right there in front of them, both of them will help.
Right.
Both of them will not bat an eye. Like, okay, they're going to open the checkbook and they're going to help, right? Or they're going to spend their time, they're going to do their service, whatever, right? But then, so it's interesting that a lot of this disagreement, that we have is on what government should and should not do.
Right. And I think what contributes to that as well is that when you insulate yourself from poverty and you insulate yourself from the effects of racism or the effects of all sorts of discrimination by living in a gated community or being in a neighborhood that is only people that look like you. And then your exposure to people is so limited, and then you start hearing some of these voices that saying, you know, like Ronald Reagan talked about welfare queens. You know, your good money is going to people who are, while you're in line with a package of hot dogs for your dinner, person in front of you is using food stamps and buying a filet mignon. And this perception that I'm the hardworking wage earner taxpayer and I'm subsidizing all of these people that don't want to work and don't work.
Right.
And I think that's right at the undersurface of how many people of privilege and advantage look at those who are underprivileged.
Yeah, so I think they're using the outliers as a common thing, which is not true. We shouldn't do that, right?
Right.
I mean, of course, that they can use that. You know, that happens. You know, I'm sure those instances happen, right? But that should not be made a blanket statement. You know,
right,
for everybody, right? So, and with this, with the social media that we have, that people are even more secluded. They are even more, you know, into a silo, into just hanging out with people who look like them, who believes the same beliefs, and it makes it worse.
Yes.
Right. And then when we see our next generations who are pretty much glued, well, you know, I must say that even our generation's probably glued to the cell phone too, and to our electronics, and we do not mingle with, even with our neighbors, right? You know, can't even say, but neighbors from different neighborhoods, right? We have 90 neighborhoods of Pittsburgh. You know, probably some of us that do not even cross the river, right? That's I thought it was just a funny saying, but it's actually true.
Yes.
Like, so, you know, we have, you know, like Storyburg, we have this DMZ for several times, right? And I noticed the attendance. It's hard to get people from different side of river to join us.
It's really true. And, you know, and I'm guilty of that. When we moved, we've been here in Pittsburgh 7 years, and thankfully we have GPS, because moving here, if we didn't have GPS, between the rivers and the hills and the bridges, you know, getting around. So just to be simple, I live on the north side. I live in Ross, and so unless I have a real good reason, I don't cross the bridges. I mean, there's plenty of good restaurants.
There, right?
Yes. And I have found that as I've gotten out more and expanded more, but there is that mindset of not venturing out as much.
Yes, yeah. Before I moved to Pittsburgh, I lived in California for since 1990, probably about 14 years. And I didn't find a need to have a GPS. Like by that time, it was what was the famous one? Garmin, right?
Garmin or TomTom was the other one, I think.
And but first month moving here, Pittsburgh, you know, in 2010, you know, I went to Costco and got one. I could go from San Francisco to LA without anything. I could drive. Once I got in LA, I could go to Pasadena. I could go to Orange County. I go to the beach. You know, I don't need that Garmin.
Right.
But here in Pittsburgh, 1 week. That's it.
Yes.
After, you know, accidentally exiting and cross the bridge, and then you're stuck. You don't know when to turn, where to turn, how to turn.
Yes.
And it's like, all right.
Right.
We need technology.
Yes. Well, even the bridge, you know, the Pitt Bridge, you got to get the left lane, then to the right lane, and then back to the left lane if you're going to the airport. That's usually where
quick decision making right there.
Exactly.
All right. So so talk about you grew up in the Bay Area. Which neighborhood exactly? Which city?
I grew up in. I was born in San Francisco. My father was a fireman in San Bruno, and San Bruno is just on the peninsula down.
Right, top of the mountain, not the mountain hill.
Yes.
Probably right.
Yes,
by the
right by the
airport.
where the airport is. That's correct, and so that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
And then when I was, I went to college at University of California, Davis, which is near Sacramento.
Yeah.
And then got married shortly after college, and started a family, and we stayed in that Northern California area. And then in I guess it was 98, job opportunity with the same company to take on greater responsibility. We moved to Austin, Texas, and then we were in Texas almost 20 years. And then I retired in Texas, and then we have 3 children, and 2 of the 3 children settled here in Pittsburgh, and this is where the grandkids were. And so after we were retired, we realized we wanted to be closer to the kids and the grandkids. So that's why we moved to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Austin was a nice city. Yeah, I had an opportunity to. Well, the company was expanding. The company that I was working for was expanding to Austin, and they tried to get people to relocate from our headquarters in Santa Clara, south of San Jose, south of Bay Area, and so we went, like a house hunting. So it's like a group of us. Like I remember, like 2 buses of us. We went on the American Airlines, I think, so it was like a weekend trip, right? Some of us were actually serious in moving. Some of us were just serious in experiencing 6th Street.
Yes. 6th Street is quite a legend.
Right. So, and then also like enjoying the Texas barbecue, I remember, I don't know, is it County
Line.
Yeah, and then there's a county by the lake or something like that.
Yes, it's right on the lake.
Yeah, right. So so I was like kidding, like this is not a lake, this is a river.
Yes.
Yes. I don't tell that to Texas.
Yes. Yeah. Town Lake essentially is the Colorado River flowing through it, but there's several. There's Inks Lake. There's Lake LBJ. There's the other lake I'm going brain dead on, but it's essentially the same river, just dammed up different ways. And
right.
That was one of the major things that Lyndon B. Johnson, he was from the Hill Country, and that was some of his legislation because that always flooded that whole area. So he set up the whole series of dams along the river to control flooding and to contain water for agriculture. So anyway,
that's how they came up with the lake.
Yes. But I agree with you. They're not lakes. The way I think of a lake.
Right. It was like not like Lake Shasta or
right.
or in the Bay Area.
Lake Tahoe.
That's there you go, right? And and I think it was in 2000. No, it was in 1990 something probably. I went to Austin, and after that, and then I finally expanded. We kind of commuted a lot. Like a back and forth. There was it was funny that the company had so much travel. Then we call it one of those American Airlines. We call it Applied Material Shuttle.
Okay.
Sometimes when we set up meetings, like, okay, when do we meet? Okay, let's meet at the AA or the number. So we just had the meeting in the airplane.
Yeah, living in Austin and traveling around the country, I did a fair amount of travel. So American Airlines was my airline. In fact, when I retired, I had 3.5 million miles accrued as far as I'm a lifetime platinum member now, which has got some perks to it.
That's right.
I was on American Airlines a lot.
Right. So yeah. So until the higher ups learn about it and say, okay, when you're having meetings on the airline, please remember that some of our competitors might be there too.
Yes. Yes.
Like, and eventually they try to clamp down on it. Okay, if you're going there, almost like the entire department, please take different flights, just in case the airplane goes down. It's like,
Yes.
what?
Yes.
We still have, they're like, we need to have our priorities straight, and the department still has to go on.
Yes. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we were so funny, morbid but funny. So you mentioned that you stay there for 20 years, and then you mentioned that two of your kids move or live in Pittsburgh. Why did they move to Pittsburgh?
Well, our oldest daughter was in college. She did whitewater rafting in Colorado, and the man that she married was from Pennsylvania. He was actually in eastern Pennsylvania, closer to Philly, and they had a real heart for inner city ministry, urban kids. And so they looked at a lot of different cities after they graduated. They wanted to do some kind of ministry work. And they looked at cities like, New York, Detroit. But an opportunity came up at a facility called George Jr., which is north towards Erie. And it's a facility where delinquent boys from the ages of like 14 to 17 are kept after they've had one offense with the law, in a way to try and help change their ways so that they don't continue along that line. And so they were house parents for for those kids for several years, and then they would come down to Pittsburgh because it was just a few hours, and then they saw an opportunity to come here in Pittsburgh, and that's when they started adopting children. One of the things they realized was that the boys they were working with were teenagers, and they wanted to they realized at the risk of, it's not like you give up on them, but by the time they're teenagers, a lot of real bad habits or really bad behaviors and trauma are really set in. So that's when they decided to adopt children, and that they came to Pittsburgh. So that's how the first daughter got here. The second daughter was the younger sister, and she would come and spend summers with her older sister. And then she liked it, and she liked Pittsburgh. And then when she got married, she and her husband decided to come to Pittsburgh.
Wow.
So when we had three children, two of the three were here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's mathematically right.
Yes. And so our son is in Phoenix, and we have two granddaughters with them. But he likes the warm weather, and he likes,
of course.
And his wife is from Arizona, so they're there. So like in December, we're going out. What we do is at Christmas time, we go out, spend time with them, and in summer they come out and see us.
Yes,
they get a relief from the heat, and we get a relief from the dreary Pittsburgh.
So you don't, like most retirees probably have Florida homes. Now you have a Arizona place to go to.
So we came to Pittsburgh really with the drive was family. I wasn't really sure I was going to like Pittsburgh that much. Didn't know. In all my business travels, I went to Philly a lot. I think I only made one trip to Pittsburgh in my whole career. So I didn't know Pittsburgh very well at all. But I will tell you, Phil, we've been pleasantly surprised. We really like Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
We find it's a really nice town. I like the size of the city. I like the fact that there's a lot of... even though it's not a big city, we've got the symphony, and we've got museums, and we've got a lot of things, and a nice downtown and stuff. So and then with all the educational opportunities here, even though I'm retired and long out of school, I attend classes with the Osher Institute at Carnegie Mellon, and it's essentially retired professors teach retired people, and it's a great way to continue learning. And there's no homework and there's no tests. You can just go and listen, and I like that.
I need to remember that. And it's not online, so you can actually see real person.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, all the classes went Zoom, and there's a couple of classes that are still done on Zoom, but for the most part, we're back to being meeting in person.
So it was not a hard decision moving from Austin to Pittsburgh.
No, I mean, we there were parts of Texas we really liked. We were fortunate. We had a small ranch, so we had horses and cattle, and so my wife especially has missed the horses. She really loved her horses, so that was a given up. But being here where we have grandchildren and children here that drop in all the time, and this weekend we were taking care of 2 of our grandchildren from our youngest daughter while they got away for an anniversary weekend. We watched the kids, and that's just really special. And you know, that's a window of time that you have. There'll be a time when they're all they're grown up, and you know, and we'll be too old to do that. We're still young enough, although we're exhausted when they leave. We're really glad.
Unification after a vacation with them, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, talking about your grandkids, and you mentioned that, you know, some of them were adopted as teenagers, which was really hard, right? As you mentioned that they have already had some of their behaviors, things that they like to do and not do, already kind of embedded. So, and then they're of different race as well, right? So what was your experience? What was your, how did you approach that? You know, because knowing that teenagers don't like to be told to begin with.
Right.
Now seeing another person, another different race, right? And you know, so how was the interaction with you?
Well, when with many of them, they were young when they were adopted.
Okay.
And one of the things that
so none of them were adopted as teenagers.
2 of them were actually adopted as young adults. They were fostered as teenagers, then adopted, formally adopted as young adults. And I'll get to those. With the younger children, something my wife and I just never could understand is people say, well, because we have biological grandchildren as well as the adopted grandchildren. We saw them as our grandchildren from the very beginning, and just absolutely love them, and find them just, in our mind, they're no different than the biological. Their skin color is different, their hair is curlier, but apart from that, you know, there's that. The racial element has been an education process, just in understanding some of. It's given me a better appreciation of what I think maybe sometimes they go through. What I mean by that is when we go into a restaurant and or a public place, and there's all of us white and then a couple of black children, that I notice there are different looks, there are different glances, and the kids pick up on it. One of our grandsons could really see, he goes, they're looking at us, aren't they? And of course they're looking at you. And so we will talk about that. And I think the other thing is I've had to try and be more cognizant of some of the differences and some of the sensitivities. One of our granddaughters had a young friend, and she changed her hair. And I said, "Oh, you got a new hairstyle, how nice." And I reached out and touched her hair. Now, to me, that's an innocent gesture. But I learned in the Black community, there's a sensitivity about causing, with Black girls, their hair. And so that got a negative reaction. And my daughter had to tell me, "Oh, Dad, that's just not something you should do. And so there's a humility I've had to say, okay, thank you for telling me. And I apologize. I'm sorry if that made you feel uncomfortable. I did not mean it that way, and that type of thing. So, those are some, different types of interactions that have caused us to think, a little bit differently. With the older grandchildren that were adopted as either late teenagers or young, there was actually two of those, and one was black and one was white. And so the white young man came from a very bad background, lived in really bad poverty, and was badly abused. And the other girl was a black woman, and they're both very precious to us. And she also had levels of abuse, and so all of that has given me just more empathy for that. But other than that, I can't give you anything else specific other than there's a humility that I don't know it all. There's things that I have to be cognizant of, or just say, sometimes I'll say, this may come out wrong, but why do you do this that way? It's not judgmental. I just don't want to understand it and that type of thing. So
So with this, I must say the big one. I mean, during the COVID, the George Floyd murder, did you and the grandkids, and probably including your daughter and her husband, had any family discussions around it?
Yes, we did, and we've had to really discuss about it, especially after the George Floyd. My grandson, the one I'm thinking of, I think at that time, that he was maybe 12, maybe 11 age. And we have some good friends that are also black, and that my daughter and son-in-law were very cognizant of the fact that as much as they love the kids, it would be good to also have black men in their lives as role models. And so these men were going to take the boys out, and they were going to go have pizza and go bowling or something fun like that. And this one grandson of mine got terrified, and he said, there won't be any white people in the car. It'll just be all black people in the car. If the police stop, someone's going to get shot.
Wow.
And I mean, he absorbed a lot of the news and the discussion, so we had to really, talk about that. And, have had, my daughter and son-in-law have had to have the talks about looking people in the eye, and with police officers, if you're, ever stopped, treat them with respect. And my daughter's done some very nice things, I think. Is she and the kids have baked cookies and take them to the local police station, and so they get exposed to good experiences with police, not just hearing what they hear on the news and that type of thing. But that incident, his fear and he said, when you and Dad are with us, you're white, you can protect us if we're in a car with all black men. So that came up.
Right. So I think it reminded me of your story when you mentioned in your story that you told in the DMZ, where you and your friend went to a restaurant, was going to a restaurant, and he told you that he forgot his wallet.
Yes.
Right. So that's, but he is an adult.
Yes.
But, hearing that your 12-year-old grandkid had that fear as well, that's
Mm-hmm.
That's sad.
Yeah. And it's, things we don't even think about.
Right. You just took it for granted, right? It's
I
like,
take
oh
it for
yeah,
absolutely
like you said,
for
it's just an
granted.
inconvenience of paying, right? Like
Yes.
forgetting wallet, right? It's like,
Yes.
like, here, take my whatever,
Yeah.
go back with cash, right?
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
There was a whole other dynamic there.
yes,
that,
like completely different dimension, or like it was like, is this the
Yes.
world, the same world
Yes.
we're living in?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, yeah, when I get in the car and go somewhere, I don't have to worry. The same friend he was talking about just recently, we were together, and he's married to a white woman, and they were going to Ohio to visit her family, which are all white, and they got a flat tire, and you had to change the tire and put one of those temporary tires on,
skinny ones,
and skinny ones, and so he was telling his father-in-law, a white man, that I think we're going to have to leave. I want to get early because I want to go get the car. I want to get a new tire on that, so I don't have to keep on the little one. And the dad said, "Oh, don't worry about it. That tire will last you, and you wait until you get back to Pittsburgh." And my friend said, "But you don't understand the thought of the tire blowing out somewhere between Ohio and Pittsburgh, and I'm a black man with a white woman. I do not want to put myself in that situation. So I'm going to do everything I can to eliminate the odds of that happening."
Yeah.
And so he said, "So I'm going to take some time, and I'm going to go get the tire fixed before I leave." But again, there's a level of anxiety that I don't even think about.
Right.
In that kind of a situation.
Right. Something that you have to think far, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like a multi-step thinking. The if-then logic.
Right.
Right. What if this happened, and then what happens?
Right.
And then you use a lot of information that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Things, and also your past trauma that you have experienced, and and then you think that what could happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be demobilizing. It could be like,
And I think another aspect, Will, I grew up in San Francisco. My father was a fireman. My father was very good friends with police officers. I grew up with the mindset that the policeman is my friend, someone I go to when I need help.
Right.
Someone that will help me, protect me. And that's not the same experience and exposure many of our friends of color have.
Right.
And unless you really think and peel that onion back, you don't realize that.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a completely different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And and that reminded me of I grew up in Indonesia, and our perceptions then, I don't know about now, our perceptions about our police was not positive mostly. Things can be handled. Things can be handled. When you're dealing with police, things can be handled, right? But then our view of American police, right? We only know it from movies, right?
Yes.
From TVs, right? That they are all good guys, right? So yeah, and like for me when I moved here, it's like, oh, okay. So I guess it's not like on TV. It's not like in the movies, right? That there's a level of experiences that other people had to go through that are different from what the TV and movies portrayed about the good guys, police, right?
Yes.
Right. And I remember, just when as soon as I said good guys, police, I just remembered a movie or actually a novel too called Serpico.
Oh, yes. Yes.
That's the only bad guy.
Yes. Yeah.
Bad police. But even then, Serpico was a good guy.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Right.
Al Pacino, right?
Right.
Yes.
Right. So, so it's hard when you have to think about what the other people are experiencing, what the other people are viewing, things that you believe that might be different, that might, not just different, might be harmful to them,
Yes.
right? And that could be, and that's hard to teach to our kids, right? Because that's just like I mentioned earlier, it's hard.
Yes.
It's sometimes that kids, teenagers or probably even younger, that level of nuance is hard to absorb.
Right.
Right. It's just easier that bad, good.
Right.
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 The angels, evil. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then
Black hats or white hats.
Right.
That's
right.
falls right into
Right.
it.
And then it's sad that even when adults also still think that simplistically, right? But I guess it's a human nature, like I said. If you're given only two choices, either it's easy or hard, people would take the easy one, right? I guess it's like a part of physics, right?
Right.
Or like electrons, they only go to the shortest path, right?
Yeah. Path of least resistance.
There you go. It's just part of nature. And then now we have to think that doing the hard thing is okay, right? So that takes a lot of intention, a lot of effort, right, on our part to do it. So now talking about hard and easy parts, right? So you had an experience as an executive of a publicly traded company, right? And so when you see many issues happening, right? And then how did you make decisions of I'm going to tackle the hard part first, or are you going to handle the easy part first? And how do you manage that?
You mean when I was functioning in that role?
Yes.
I ascribed to the philosophy, and it worked best for me, that I would try and attack the hard questions first, or the hard issues first. Because if I started with the easy issues, I never wanted to go up to get more.
That takes a lot of intention to do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I would really try and look at as big a picture as I could and try and get. I made big decisions based on a lot of data or a lot of information. I was one that sought a lot of counsel from different perspectives before I came to a decision. That frustrated some of my peers and even some of my bosses, because I would take more time to make a decision. Because I learned early on, when I made snap decisions and I didn't have the full story, that I made some bad decisions. So and I would work on that too, from the standpoint, you can, what's the old saying, paralysis by analysis, where, at some point you have to make a decision.
Right.
But I would really try and get as much information from various perspectives as I could. So if it was, a labor issue or something like that, I would try and get the understanding of the workers and what was the story. The other thing is, I tried to really instill in people that work for me, do not tell me what you think I want to hear. I want the unvarnished truth. And then I also found it was very helpful to me. I would just get out of the office, and one of my mentors really, get out of the office, get on a plane and go visit this warehouse, walk it, talk to some of the forklift drivers, talk to some of your truck drivers, some of the customer service people. And especially if you can develop a trust that they can tell you honestly without facing repercussions. And that takes time to build that trust. But then I could get some really good information to make decisions that were sometimes very difficult and sometimes were very hard. But one of the things that that I come back to that where something I was not proud of, and I was head of this division for a number of years, and we had a new head of HR, human resources, come in and sat with me, and we were going over some of the issues that we had. And he said, John, I got to ask, your team, and I was very proud of my team. He said, there's not one woman and there is not one person of color on your team. Help me understand that. And that just kind of caught me flat-footed. And my flippant answer at that time was, well, no one's applied. And I said, and the company I worked for, a lot of our salespeople and people came up from the sales ranks was, we sold insecticides and pesticides. So it was the agricultural community. And I said, you know, the schools that we interviewed from, we didn't get many applicants. So that's, so, you know, I wasn't deliberately excluding. And he said, so do you go to other campuses or other colleges that have more diversity? I said, well, no, we usually recruit and we have a system. It's worked really good.
Look at the bottom line.
But that conversation has haunted me over the years because I was doing what was easy in that standpoint. I knew a system, the campuses and all of that. Hired from, promoted from within.
There's a supply chain.
Yes.
Yes. These schools are produce good students, reliable students. Let's visit them every year.
Yes. Right? And had a good track record.
Yes.
And anyway, it helped me. It started my thinking. Maybe there's a better way, or should be doing something differently. The other aha moment was something that I was hiring a director of marketing, and I hired from the outside, and offered him the job. He took it, and I'm on the phone with him, and he, in the interview process, he referred to his spouse all the time. Said, my spouse and I did this, my spouse and I did that. So when we had a conversation after we had hired him, I said, now when you get to Austin, Jane and I, my wife and I, would like to take out you and your wife. Oh, by the way, what's your wife's name? There's this long pause. And he said, well, John, I thought you were aware I do have a spouse, but it's a he, not a she. I said, oh. You know, and the reason I tell that story, Will, is that up until that point, I had no exposure to gay people. The world I grew up in, I didn't have any friends that were gay, that I knew that were gay. I should say that. And he came to work for me and became a very good friend in the process. He worked for me and was an outstanding employee. And Jane and I actually socialized with him and his partner and really enjoyed them. And that started my whole thinking. And it's because I had exposure to another person. It was different. Before, I could look at gay people as the other. It's somebody else, another community. Don't understand.
Only happens in the movies.
Yes. But here was someone that I worked with on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, and that just changed the whole perspective. And he was one that didn't really push that issue. But one time we were talking, because there was a voting issue in Texas at the time. And he said, John, do you realize that if I got really sick and was in the hospital, in the state of Texas, even though he had been married to his partner for 12 or 13 years. They had gotten married up in Maine, I think, or somewhere. But it was a legally spouse. He said in the state of Texas, he would have no rights to come to see me or make any decisions on my behalf.
Right.
And then, and he's my spouse, my legal spouse. And I go, wow, yeah. Again, exposure to things that
You didn't think about.
I didn't
right?
think about.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's not right. He goes, right. He says, so now you know how to vote, John. I go, okay.
That's smooth.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it takes a lot of in-person engagement, in-person just exposure,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
That will open up your thinking, your perspective, your mind, or, So we have to have a lot of that, right? So it's just a beginning, right? I think we know, and I'm glad that you were part of the DMZ with your story, in our inaugural DMZ, actually, right? So that story that really hopefully inspire other people to share the same stories, because it's quite, everybody's personal experiences are probably unique to them.
Yes.
Right. And we have to have a lot of the unique perspectives that make us whole.
Right.
And when you see them in person, when you have that exposure, and you are more open to it, right? Because otherwise you're like, oh, yeah, whatever, slide.
Right.
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 And I don't agree with it, right? Or just like not like, right? So,
well, I think the DMZ, I really, I haven't attended all of them, but I think 3 or 4 of them. The one where I was at, I thought was really good because, and I can't remember the different names, but one woman spoke from the perspective of her daughter having an abortion and how that was such a calamitous event in their life. And then someone else from another perspective. And it really gave you perspective. I can see where each one of them came from.
Yes.
I may not agree with their conclusion, but I see their humanity.
Right.
They were trying the best they could to make a good decision or handle it. And that, I think, is the beauty of the DMZ, is
Thank you.
Hearing these different perspectives and putting a face and a life to a position, as opposed to just I'm pro this or anti this, that type of thing.
Yeah, we want to know, like, why? I mean, where does it come from, right? I mean, it can't be just out of vacuum. I'm sure that a lot of people just, like a textbook answers or whatever, that they do not experience, but they just have this abstract belief, right? But we want to hear stories that are, that are created based on your own personal stories, and people need to hear that, right? So but it's a challenge, because like sometimes people just don't want to share. They're afraid, right? They like on camera in front of people, that's already a big hurdle, right?
Yes.
And then you tell this sensitive, authentic, and could be damaging, hurtful, even to you and to probably for other people, and that's another thing, right? So it's a tough one. So I'm really glad that you volunteered. So
thank you.
So going back to your experiences, as an executive, making big decisions and having those perspectives, your process to have those perspectives to make that decisions. So what do you think, is the biggest problem that our city is facing, and how would you solve it?
Boy, that was no softball.
It's a good ending.
Yes. Yes.
I know it's just it's an abstract, right? We're not elected officials. So.
Sure. I think the crime issue is, or the perception of the crime issue is a big thing. In the last year or so, I've been attending the jail oversight board meetings right here in the town, because Our jail have a horrendous record of deaths and the way prisoners are being treated, and in that exposure, and I've just been going and just sitting and listening. I haven't really spoken or given and the jail oversight board is once a month. The warden and this board, some city council members and some judges are all on this board, and it's the opportunity to hear from the community about, to report and also hear. And what that has just shown me is first of all, what a deplorable job we do in treating the less of us. When I say the less of us, the less fortunate of us. And let's face it, prisoners in jail are probably on the lowest level of people's value system. But they're still human beings. And some of the injustice and how they got there, and in the jail, sometimes they're there 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, and just because they haven't had a trial yet and they can't afford bail, so they're stuck, in the jail in horrendous situations. But what I have seen that's been most concerning to me, Will, is the apparent apathy among some of the judges that sit on the board and and the warden. I'm so glad he just resigned. So glad. Just horrible in every sense of the word. And I wouldn't want the warden's job. That would be a tough job. But there's a decent way of how to handle people and all of that. And so I think that with we have election coming up. We're going to have a new county administrator, and hopefully some changes would go on. But you asked the question, what is one of the big problems, and how would you go about solving it? And I just think that there's got to be more accountability for how we treat people that we're supposed to serve here in the county. So how do we serve the way we administer the jail, how we police, how we respond, all those things. And there's just got to be accountability. With the Jail Oversight Board, Rich Fitzgerald, who is the county executive, when the Jail Oversight Board was established, he's supposed to be the sitting member. He has never come to a board meeting. He sends a delegate every single time. And there's no accountability for that. And I think that's just, unacceptable. But the thing that gets sometimes where I can get depressed or get very discouraged is that whether you look at policing, or if you look at the jail, or you look at the state of education, our different schools, all these different things, and you just see there's just some dysfunction through it all. So I don't know how, I'm not smart enough to know how you get at it, except trying to get people that really care working together and to try and find a common solution. And that's really difficult. I wish I had more to offer you there.
Thank you. You gave a lot. I think you touched the accountability, and then also people who care, right? And that's tough, right?
Yes.
Because finding sometimes people on the top, not necessarily people who care.
Yes.
Right? They care about their, unfortunately, the metrics that they're accountable to, right? And sometimes those metrics are not really an indicator of accountability.
Right.
They're just metrics, right?
Right.
Where they're going to get their pay raise from, or whatever, right? Or their bonus or whatever.
Right.
So so it's difficult.
Right.
and some of them are elected officials, so they have to think about their re-election and their money to get re-election.
Right.
And it's tough.
It is. It is.
All right. I don't want to end the conversation in the tough situation, but we're living in tough situation. So that's life.
We just got to keep trying.
Yes.
One day at a time.
One day at a time, one person at a time to talk to, one
Yes.
stranger at a time to talk
Yes.
and get to know.
Yes.
And yeah, that's how we can do about it.
And I applaud you for what Storyburg has been doing and
thank you.
continue to do.
All right.
Thank you,
sir.